Hoops through life. Hoops through life.
Welcome to another episode of Hoops Through Life, a podcast where we discuss everything related to women's basketball player development, the collegiate recruiting process, and transition from high school to college. I'm your host, Elsbeth Bierman. Today, we are continuing our skill series and talking all about shooting. Shooting is a skill that we could have a whole series about, but I honestly don't want to make this episode overly complicated. I want to give you an idea of what coaches are looking for when assessing shooting and the idea of different levels of a shooter and a few key pointers to keep in mind as you're working on your game as it relates to shooting. We always generally start with the why. The why here is very obvious. Why is shooting important? Unless they've changed the rules, the way to win the game is the highest score, right? And scoring cannot happen without shooting. So let's just jump in and talk about how to evaluate shooting. Here's some key questions that I ask myself when I'm evaluating someone's shooting abilities, and I encourage you to ask yourself the same. As a caveat, I want to say shooting is complicated, as I mentioned before. There are so many opinions on how to teach shooting, what shooting should look like. And if you just Googled shooting on YouTube, you would probably get 20 different videos of 20 different people trying to teach shooting and talk about shooting in 20 different ways. So I want to say my opinion just to start all of this, and it's okay if you don't agree with me, but I do not believe in one ideal shooting form. I do believe there are certain targets that make an efficient shooter versus an inefficient shooter. For example, let's say release point or the arc height or rotation of the ball, but everybody has a different body. So how can I expect everybody to shoot the same? But I just wanted to start off with that. All right, let's go into the evaluation process. So number one, and again, same question I always ask for every skill. How coordinated do you look when shooting? Are your movements fluid, or do you have, let's say, a hitch in your shot? It's a bit disjointed. A smooth shot coordinates the lower and the upper half of the body. Number two, can you finish? This is more so finishing, but I included it in shooting as well because it's scoring. But can you finish at the basket with both your right and your left hand? Being able to finish around the rim with both of your hands is really important if you want to be a successful high school basketball player and beyond. Number three, can you knock down a static catch and shoot? This is you on the perimeter, maybe off of a drive and a kick. And this is, in my opinion, the first level of being some sort of a shooting threat is can you just catch and shoot and knock down that open shot? Number four, how many different types of screens can you shoot off of? And this is I'm talking about off the ball. This tells me how many different angles you can shoot from off the catch. And this can also show different types of footwork, how you angle your body, how you can get around a screen, let's say from a pin down, and how you can turn and catch and shoot. That would be, to me, the second level from static catch and shoot. All right, now we're moving off of screens. Still don't have the ball in our hands until the actual shot. Number five, can you create your shot and shoot off the dribble? Now the ball is in your hands, some sort of a playmaker, and this will tell me how dangerous you are with the ball. Can you hit a step back? Can you create your own shot? Can you get by one defender, maybe engage another defender? Or can you get by a defender and pull up and shoot on a dime? And last but not least, number six, can you shoot with mental pressure? Now this goes through every single one, but when the shot clock is going down or at the end of a period or at the end of the game and is your team setting you up for a shot or somebody else? Have you shot a last second shot in the game? Can you handle that type of pressure? Even at a free throw, you're down by 2. You get fouled, last second shot. Are you hitting those 2 free throws? So last one is, can you shoot with that mental pressure? So if you take that evaluation list I just described, that could be your progress map as you're working on your shooting abilities. In my opinion, if you can't make a right and a left-handed layup, please don't work on your step back threes off of the dribble over getting finishes around the rim. Now, the road to becoming a better shooter in game starts with understanding what types of shots you want to get better at. And so the way that you can figure that out is take a step back, think about the offense your team runs, and ask yourself what types of shots you get the most in the game. If it is a catch and shoot three off of a drive, then you know you need to work on moving without the ball and shooting off the catch. So now you know you also need to work on movement from a drive. You can't just stand there and be static. You got to get in a window where your teammate can see you. My recommendation would be to get really good at one thing. And then once you get known as somebody who can, let's say, knock down an open shot on the perimeter, you become so much more dangerous. Now your fakes will be that much more effective, and you will naturally start to get more pull up, like you'll naturally start to get different types of shots. For example, pull up shots, because the defense will be flying out at you so hard trying to stop you from shooting that you'll be able to get to the rim, or you'll be able to take a dribble or two, get into the gut and then just score. So this is how your game, specifically shooting we're talking about right now, but this is how your game can continue to build, but it does happen one piece at a time. All right, you've worked backwards, the types of shots that you need to work on, what you get most in the game. Once you decide that, it's time to get a plan to work on those types of shots. I'm a big believer of you should always go into the gym with a specific plan, and this plan should answer two questions. Number one, what are you working on? And number two, how are you working on that skill? Those are two of the most basic questions, but I would argue a majority of athletes go to the gym without a very specific idea of what they're working on and what they want to get better at and how to do that. So then what that turns into is somebody being in the gym for 3, 4 hours, just kind of throwing shots up. And they look and say, oh, I was at the gym for 3 to 4 hours. 30, 45 minutes of really targeted work is better than 3 hours not really knowing what you're doing. And then, so those are the two questions I want you to answer the next time you go to the gym. What are you working on? How are you working on it? And then the bonus level is, how are you going to keep track of your workouts? So do you have a notebook where you track your workouts or your progress? What does that look like? How do you know if you're getting better at the intended skill? I want to get to a few of my favorite shooting activities. Generally, when I work on shooting with an athlete, I prefer to have two athletes together working on shooting. That way there's some sort of live defensive pressure, but sometimes you're training on your own or you don't have the ability to bring a friend with you, and that's okay too. That shouldn't hinder your progress. So my suggestion to those who are training on their own is adding variability to each shot, and I'll explain what I mean by that shortly. I do want to say one thing for coaches. One thing I don't think as coaches we do very well is give athletes the reps on the decision to shoot. Most people know when an athlete catches the ball on the perimeter, they have three options: dribble, pass, shoot. Just because an athlete can shoot, let's say they have the ability to shoot, they're a very good shooter from the sense of if they stood in the corner, they can knock down 10 in a row. But just because they can doesn't mean that they're going to make the right decision to shoot. I mean, how many times have you as a coach, or let's think about a teammate where you know that they're a good shooter. It's pretty, it looks great when it comes off their hand, and then the coach in the game is screaming at them, shoot the ball, shoot the ball. Why aren't you shooting the ball? Well, there's a disconnect there, right? I'm sure the athlete doesn't mean to not shoot the ball. I'm sure they would love to score points, but it's that decision to shoot that I don't think we teach very well when we're working on shooting. So to me, whenever you can work in the decision to shoot or not to shoot, you're already making the activity more game-like. And maybe it's the decision between shooting or driving, or shooting or passing. So the first activity that I want to share it's called butt ball. And so the way that this works is imagine a basketball court. You start, let's say for ease of location, you're starting at the top of the key. One defender's feet are on, let's say the free throw line, facing the basket. The offensive player is directly behind the defensive player, and they have the ball on like the small of their back. So they're both offense and defense are facing in the same direction. The game starts when the offense lifts the ball off of the defender's back, and then you have one dribble to score, and it has to be a jump shot. So what you're working on here is you're working on creating separation on a shot. I really like this one because it works on exploding in all different directions. You get one shot and there is a little bit of defense there as well. And I would encourage you to move this around all spots of the court. Remember, one dribble to get a shot off, and you can play to three or five or whatever you want to play with as a one-on-one type of game. All right, the second one is a two-on-one shoot or pass. And this is working on exactly that decision I just talked about, which is the decision to shoot or the decision to pass the ball. And this can progress to two-on-two as well. All this looks like is one defender in the middle of the lane, two offensive players, one pass away. So you can start corner 45, the elbows, anywhere you want, but you want to start one pass away. The defender doesn't say who they're going to start to. They throw the ball and then they close out on somebody, and it's live from there, but it's to a shot. So you can either shoot or you get one pass, and that's a pass and a shot. Very, very simple, really working on that decision to pass or to shoot, that extra pass or not. And then the way you can progress this to two-on-two is you can get a second defender in there that trails the play, and now you can play live out of that if you'd like. The next activity is this is good if you are on your own and still want to work on shooting. It's called short, medium, long. And this is a great way to add variability, like I talked about before, to each shot when you're shooting on your own. So you alternate between different distances every single shot. So short, medium, or long. The only rule is you can't shoot from the same distance twice in a row. The goal here is to not allow yourself to get into a shooting rhythm. I guarantee that you're never going to be allowed to shoot 10 shots from the exact same spot in the exact same way during the game. I could even argue that no two shots in the game that you take are alike. Maybe they're from the same spot, but most likely not. But they're going to be different types of pressures. There's a closeout coming from a different angle, or maybe you're a little bit more fatigued than you were earlier in the game. You're never going to shoot the same shot in a game twice. So why would you practice in a way where you're shooting the same shot over and over and over again? Vary your distances. You can vary your fatigue level. You can vary the approach that you take. Maybe you're going from the right to the left. Maybe you're backpedaling into your shot. There are so many ways you can add variability to every single shot that you shoot, and you will see the results in the game. And a way you can test yourself here is, let's say you set a timer for 2 minutes and you say, all right, I'm doing short, medium, long shots, and I have to make 20 shots in 2 minutes or something. Now you're getting a little bit of cardio, you're pushing yourself, and there's mental stressors too. You're pushing yourself to get under a time limit, get a certain shot number in under a time limit, and you can give yourself a punishment if you don't get that goal or something, whether that's a sprint or some push-ups, or you just have to do it until you get it. All right, the last one I'm going to talk about, which also has a mental component as well, is called Beat the Ghost. I've heard people say beat the pro. I've also seen it as an Allen Iverson type of activity where you're going against a quote unquote pro or a ghost, somebody who's not there, and you can make the numbers match your skill level. So the way that it would work is, let's say you're going to 11 or 21. Every time you make the shot, that's a 1 point for you. Every time you miss it, it could be 1, 2, or 3 points, depending on your skill level for the ghost, the pro, whoever you're playing against. Again, it works on mental toughness when you're shooting. You must shoot from a different spot each time, or you can shoot from the same general location. You can have a rebounder or you cannot have a rebounder. But the idea is makes are for you, misses are for whoever that imaginary person you're playing against. It's really interesting when you do this activity with players because you'll see how they might behave in a pressure situation. So, for example, I did this exact thing with an athlete the other day, and she was just about to win this game, but then she missed her last 2 shots in a row, which caused the ghost to win the game. And I could visibly see her tightening up as she was shooting those last couple of shots. Not only was she tightening up, she was moving so much slower because she didn't want to miss. And when we reflected on that afterwards, she couldn't really articulate exactly what was going on. And so I gave my observation that it looked like she was shooting not to miss, not shooting to score. So with all of these activities, be creative. When you think about ways to push yourself when you're shooting, really take those game scenarios that you're going through night in and night out and incorporate that into what you're shooting. What decisions do you have to make in the game when you're shooting? What footwork are you using? How tired are you? And really mimic those circumstances and that environment as you're getting shots up. And I get a lot of questions also about how much is good enough? How many shots should I get up a day? There are all these things that'll tell you you have to do, X amount of shots, 500 shots, 1,000 shots. This is what good shooters get. This is what they do. My advice to you is the first thing you should do is be consistent with getting better. If you're being consistent in getting better and you're showing up every single day with a plan to get better, all of those days are going to add up. And then that will tell you how much is good enough. How much do I need to do in order to see results, the results that I want on the court? All right, so to wrap things up, here are a few final takeaways to keep in mind. Number 1, reflect on what shots you're getting the most in the games or the shots that you're struggling with in games and start working there. That's your starting point. Number 2, you build your game one piece at a time. It takes patience and consistency. It's simple, but is not easy. All right, thank you so much for tuning in today. If you found this episode helpful, share it with a teammate or a coach. And if you're ready to take your game to the next level, reach out to me for training or resources. I will see you all next time. Thank you so much for listening. If you aren't already, I would highly recommend subscribing to the podcast so you can get updated once new episodes are dropped. If you're a fan of the show, go ahead and leave a review. It really helps spread the word to more athletes, parents, and coaches. Now, if you have any questions for myself or future guests, feedback, or you're curious on how we can work together to help you reach your basketball goals, let's have a conversation. Feel free to email me at l@hoopsthroughlife.com today to set that up. That's el@hoopsthroughlife.com. Thank you, and I look forward to hearing from you soon.